Claire Harper awakened to the distant hum of lawnmowers and the song of mockingbirds outside her bedroom window. Sunlight slanted through ivory blinds, painting warm stripes across her navy blue comforter. She turned toward her husband, David, but his side of the bed was empty. Again, the Harpers lived on Maplewood Drive, a quiet cul-de-sac in Pleasant Grove, where white picket fences glowed fresh under spring blooms and neighbors exchanged friendly waves on evening walks. On paper, Claire, 38, and David, 42, embodied suburban success. 2 children in local schools, Dave's executive role at a tech firm, Claire's popular baking blog, and weekend barbecues that drew every neighbor with a sweet tooth. Today, however, something fell off. Claire sat up, smoothing her silk pajama top, and glanced at the kitchen clock, 7:15 a.m. David usually poured her a cup of French press coffee by 7 o'clock. She padded downstairs in slippers. The countertop was spotless, save for her camera tripod pointed toward a pristine smoothie bowl and a mason jar latte. David must have set up his morning live stream for clients to watch her healthy breakfast hacks. Yet she saw no telltale glow of her phone recording. "David?" she called, voice echoing in the tiled kitchen. No reply, just the low drone of the refrigerator and the faint aroma of freshly ground beans. Coffee brewed, but untouched. Claire frowned and flicked on the stovetop light. The burner beneath the espresso maker was cold. Her phone buzzed. A Slack notification from David's work account. An urgent request for a last-minute product demo at 8 a.m. He'd be out the door soon. A knock at the front window caught her eye. She peered through the lace curtain. A small white hatchback idled by the driveway. The window rolled down, and a young woman's face, early 20s, dark hair tucked under a cap, a green-branded bag held in one hand, peered back at her. "Delivery for Claire Harper," the girl called through the glass. Claire's heart fluttered. They didn't ordinarily order breakfast delivery. Between the kids and Dave's schedule, they seldom needed Uber Eats before work and school. She forced a smile. "I didn't order anything." The driver held up a printed receipt. Payment was on his card, David Harper. Her eyes flicked to the receipt. "Your omelet with avocado and that lavender latte?" Claire bit her lip. She should call David. But she swallowed and stepped outside. He must have treated the office. "Thanks." She took the bags. As the driver drove off, Claire peeked inside. Perfectly plated food, garnished with microgreens and a folded note on top. She unfolded it carelessly. "Can't wait to see you tonight, Red Heart, E." David's card. A mystery breakfast. And a sign that the life she thought she knew was already fraying. Later that morning, Claire scrolled through her phone, tasting the silence in David's unread text. "Running late. Please set up the live stream and take the kids to school. Don't need me till tonight, X." Her fingers hovered over the call icon, but she hesitated. "E? Ella? Who was E?" At work, Claire forced a bright feed post. "Good morning, friends. Today's recipe is a springberry pavlova," yet her voice wavered. Every ding of a notification made her start. By afternoon, neighbors stopped at her door. "Saw David's car gone all day. Everything okay?" "The kid said you looked worried in carpool line." Claire laughed it off. Just a busy day. But in her heart, the perfect veneer felt cracked. And somewhere in Pleasant Grove, the real cracks were widening. Cracks that would shatter lives before the day was done. The next morning, Claire Harper awoke with a lingering unease. She poured herself a glass of water and sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand through her short, ash-blonde hair. Her phone lay face up on the bedside table, untouched since the cryptic note. At 56, David Harper was meticulous about details, so why would he risk sending a young Uber Eats driver like Ella Torres, barely 21 and fresh out of community college, to deliver breakfast under his name? Claire slipped into her robe and padded down the hallway. She passed the framed wedding photo, them smiling in their late 30s at a beachfront ceremony, and felt its cheerfulness mock her. In the kitchen, she set the delivery bags on the island again and unfolded the receipt. David's corporate card ended in -4412, and the charge timestamp read 7:04 a.m. The lavender latte's swirling foam still looked pristine, as if nobody had dared taste it. A sudden knock startled her. She glanced toward the window. expecting the same white hatchback. Instead, it was the maintenance man, Mr. Patel, replacing the filter in their HVAC system. "Good morning, Mrs. Harper," he called through the glass. "Sorry to bother you, but your AC has been icy cold all night. I've adjusted the settings." "Thank you," Claire said, faking a smile. "That's helpful." He departed, humming, and she closed the window with trembling hands. At the stove, she heated the omelet, folded just so, with baby spinach and roasted tomatoes, and sat down with her phone in hand. She dialed David's direct line at the office. Rings, straight to voicemail. "Hey Claire, sorry I missed you. Things are crazy here. I'll call tonight." His voice, warm but distracted. She hung up and wiped a tear from her cheek. Later, she told herself she'd chalk it up to a client emergency. Still, the pattern gnawed at her. Early morning orders, unexplained hours away, and now a secret E. Whoever Ella was, Claire intended to find out. By midday, the Harper kitchen felt suffocatingly empty. Claire squeezed in a few emails between school pickups and snack requests from their 8-year-old son, Jackson, and 10-year-old daughter, Sophie. The children gossiped excitedly about their new class project. Claire reacted with half smiles, her mind elsewhere. Ella's pale green hat, Dave's note, and the stolen minutes in which she tried to call David all collided into a tight knot inside her chest. When the kids trotted off to the school bus, Claire seized her chance. She grabbed her keys and headed for the driveway. Her black Volvo SUV idled to life, and she drove past Maplewood Drive's blooming magnolias toward the shopping strip, where Uber Eats drivers congregated between runs. In a strip mall parking lot's far corner, a row of delivery cars idled. DoorDash, Grubhub, and a few Uber Eats vehicles. Claire found Ella's hatchback, its green logo prominent on the passenger door. She parked beside it and watched as a young woman in slim cargo pants and a yellow-green uniform tightened the straps on her insulated bag. Claire approached slowly. "Excuse me, are you Ella Torres?" Ella turned, relief and surprise flickering across her freckled, round face. "Yes, ma'am. Can I help you?" Claire offered her best combat firm smile. "I'm Claire Harper. I received a delivery from you this morning at my home. I'd like to know why my husband, David, sent you." Ella's brows knitted. "Mrs. Harper, Mr. Harper paid on his app, so I just followed the request. He didn't say it was for you or anything." She tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear. "He left a note asking me to knock twice, wait for acknowledgement, and then hand you this bag with the breakfast inside." Claire's stomach churned. "And you didn't question that a man in his mid-50s might be sending a 21-year-old Uber driver to deliver breakfast at 7 a.m.? Ella's eyes widened. I'm new. It's my first week working mornings, and I didn't think. He seemed nice, though. Polite. He said it was a tip for my service." "Show me the note," Claire said, extending her hand. Ella fished a slightly crumpled slip of paper from her uniform pocket and handed it over. In neat cursive, the message read, "Double knock. Hand to Claire. Can't wait for tonight. E." Claire felt her knees weaken. She studied the handwriting. The looping E, the tight cross on the T's. It matched David's script. The implication hung between them. Ella's lower lip trembled. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper. I didn't know. I thought you'd be happy for me. He said I was special." Claire's heart cracked. She had been special once, too. She bent and whispered, "How special are we talking?" Ella's lower eyelashes shimmered with tears. "He told me his wife was busy and that he needed company. He said I reminded him of youth and vitality. He paid extra for speed and discretion." Claire swallowed. "Did he ever ask you to meet him outside of delivering food?" Ella looked down. "Yes. Last night, he texted me. My number was in his phone for the order. He asked me to come by the house after midnight. Said he'd pay triple for just company." Anger and grief flared in Claire's chest. "And did you go?" Ella shook her head vigorously. "No, I was scared. I told him I don't do that kind of thing." She bit her lip. He got upset, said he'd find someone who would. Claire's hand shook as she returned the note. "Thank you for telling me the truth. I promise I'll make sure you're never put in a position like this again." Ella exhaled, relief mingling with guilt. "I just wanted to work hard and pay my rent. She wiped her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Harper." Claire offered her another tight smile, then stepped back. As she climbed into her SUV, she dialed 911 on her mobile. "I need to report an adult who is soliciting a minor," she said, voice trembling. "Her name is Ella Torres, and she's only 21, but it's still illegal." And as she drove home, her hands gripping the wheel, Claire realized that the catered lies had only just begun, and that the darkness lurking behind Maplewood Drive was far deeper than an affair. That night, the Harper household settled into its usual rhythm. David's office light winked on until well past midnight. Claire's book lay abandoned on a nightstand, and the children slept soundly in their shared room, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath their parents' roof. But for David, a different ritual was unfolding. At 11:58 p.m., David's phone buzzed on the kitchen island. He slipped on a gray cashmere sweater over his pajamas, took a breath, and opened a message from Ella. "Ella, running late. Can you wait 5? He tapped back, hand steady. "Of course. Door will be unlocked." He poured himself a scotch on the rocks, checked the framed photo of Claire on the counter, taken at their 20th wedding anniversary, and then padded barefoot to the front door. He turned the lock 3 times, just as Ella's note had instructed, and heard the soft click of the bolt releasing. He slipped into the foyer, pressing his back flat against the wall as a faint tap, echoed through the stillness. Ella Torres appeared in the doorway, her uniform replaced by a loose olive jumpsuit and sandals, her dark hair cascading past her shoulders. Her eyes, large and vulnerable in the hallway light, flicked to David. "Thank you for waiting," she whispered, voice barely audible. David stepped forward, closing the door quietly behind her. "You're late," he teased, voice low but not unkind. "Were you nervous?" She shrugged, revealing a flash of midnight blue manicure. "Traffic, and I'm not used to freelancing at this hour." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I shouldn't have said yes." He reached out, brushing a lock from her face. "You don't have to do this," he said gently. "Only if you want to." Ella looked at him, really looked, and her mouth quivered. "I want to," she admitted, "but I'm afraid." He led her toward the open-plan kitchen. Under the soft halo of the pendant light, he poured her a glass of water and settled her on a stool. The island's marble surface gleamed like alabaster beneath her fingertips. David stood close behind her. "Talk to me," he murmured, voice husky. "Tell me what you like." She swallowed. You make me feel seen." Her confession hung between them. "At the restaurant, I'm just another delivery. But here you ask my name. You treat me like I matter." His pulse quickened. He laid a hand on her shoulder. "You matter to me." Ella turned, placing her hands on his chest. "Not my rent, not my grades, not my friend, me." He caught her gaze. The truth in her eyes ignited something in him he hadn't felt in years. He leaned in. She met him halfway. Their lips met softly, hesitantly at first, then with desperate longing. The kiss deepened, tongues brushing, and David felt his world tilt. Behind them, the butcher block cutting board held a half-sliced avocado and a serrated knife, tools of domesticity turned into instruments of desire. Ella's arms curled around his neck. His hands slid to her waist, drawing her closer. In the silence of the Harper kitchen, the boundaries dissolved. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, even the muffled breaths of his sleeping children faded into nothingness. There was only Ella and himself, two souls adrift in a sea of secrecy. Suddenly, Ella pulled back, eyes wide with panic. "David, we shouldn't." He silenced her with a fingertip to her lips. "Shoo," he whispered. "It's okay." She trembled, and he lowered her onto the stool. His shirt brushed against her thighs as he knelt before her, hands grazing the soft fabric of her jumpsuit. Ella closed her eyes, breath hitching as David's fingers found the zipper. A creak on the stairs froze them both. Their heads snapped toward the hallway. Claire's silhouette appeared at the top of the steps, robe wrapped tight around her. In her hand, a phone glowed with notification alerts. Claire's eyes widened. "David," she croaked, voice thick with shock. "Ella." Ella gasped, yanking her jumpsuit zipper up. David sprang to his feet, smoothing his pajama top. Claire's chest rose and fell, her face pale in the wash of overhead light. How long? Claire's voice cracked. How long has this been going on? David's throat tightened. He stepped toward his wife. Claire, it's not what? Claire held up the phone. I have your texts, David. Midnight meetups. Secret orders. A code name. She looked between them, eyes blazing with hurt and rage. I thought this was a mistake. But that look in your eyes. Ella scrambled off the stool and backed away, eyes darting. Mrs. Harper, I didn't know. Claire's gaze snapped to Ella. You know exactly what you're doing. Using my husband, this house, my life. She lowered her voice to a whisper. Get out. Ella nodded and fled down the hallway, heels clicking on the hardwood. David reached for Claire's hand, but she shrank back, wrapping her arms around herself. You invited her in, Claire said, voice hollow. You betrayed our vows. David closed the distance, voice pleading. Claire, I'm so sorry. Claire turned on her heel and raced up the stairs, slamming her bedroom door. David sank to the floor, head in his hands. The clock ticked on, and in the kitchen's cold afterglow, he realized that nothing could ever be the same. Their perfect suburb had cracked wide open, and the affair he thought he could control had come roaring into the light, bringing with it consequences he had never imagined. The morning after the confrontation, Claire Harper moved through her home as though through a haunted museum. Each familiar detail, the breakfast nook, the vase of tulips on the windowsill, the children's drawings frayed at the edges, felt tainted by last night's betrayal. She poured herself coffee, but let it go cold, staring out at the quiet cul-de-sac where white picket fences glowed in the sunrise. David still hadn't come down. Claire decided she needed evidence before an irreversible decision. Leaving Jackson and Sophie with a trusted neighbor, she retrieved her phone and pictures of the torn note from Ella, the folded can't wait for tonight. Message imprinted in her mind. She also screenshot their text exchanges, Ella's polite thank yous and David's late-night invitations. If she wanted to protect her family, she would need to present proof. Claire's first stop was the local Starbucks. If David had texted Ella, he must have used his phone nearby. She sat at a corner table, opened her laptop, and began drafting a formal record of events. Then, with a bit of guilt, she slipped into his banking app on his always-logged-in browser. She scrolled through expenses, Uber Eats deliveries at odd hours, gift card purchases, and one lavish $300 bouquet, billed at 2:23 a.m. Her stomach twisted. Back home, she set her trap. She arranged a family dinner for 8 p.m. sharp, telling David in a curt text, "Don't be late. We'll talk." Her words were measured, but carried an unspoken edge. David returned at 7:45 p.m., carrying his briefcase and the scent of late-night traffic. His gray hair was mussed, and his once impeccable suit jacket looked rumpled. He spotted Claire in the dining room. Table set with Sophie's favorite spaghetti and Jackson's macaroni and cheese, candles flickering. "Family dinner?" he asked, masking relief with confusion. "Yes," Claire replied, voice neutral. "Please sit." She slid his plate toward him. He settled opposite, removed his tie, and tried a wry smile. "I owe you an apology." Claire met his gaze. "I know about Ella, about the breakfast, the texts, the meetups." Her tone was cold as marble. David swallowed. "It's not what you think. I have proof." She laid her phone on the table, displaying the note and bank receipts. "Explain these." David's shoulders slumped. "Ella, she's in trouble. I was helping her. She needed money for school fees." His eyes pleaded. "I never meant it like that." Claire's chest constricted. "So, I'm supposed to believe that at midnight you're tutoring a college student? Using our marital app for her tuition fund." She tapped the bouquet purchase. "And these flowers, she sent them to herself, didn't she?" He looked away, voice soft. She needed encouragement. The world's tough on someone her age. Claire's eyes narrowed. How soon before she needed more than encouragement? Her words hurtled like shards. "Are you in love with her? Do you think I'd let you turn our home into her playground?" David rose, voice trembling. Claire held up a hand. "Save it." She stood. "I want you out tonight." Her words fell in the candlelight like ice. "Pack a bag. I'll call a lawyer in the morning." David's face twisted with anguish. "Claire, please." She shook her head and left the room. He stared at the empty chair, the table set for unity, now an altar of broken vows. In her bedroom, Claire dialed her sister. "I need advice. I'm filing for separation, and yes, I have proof." And the kids, her voice cracked. "I'm terrified of what happens next." Her sister's comforting words echoed in her ear as Claire realized that the perfect suburb had become a battleground. Outside, David's footsteps padded down the hallway, each one marking the distance growing between them. That night, as she lay awake, Claire understood two brutal truths. First, that her husband's betrayal ran deeper than a simple affair. And second, that confronting the lie would only entangle them further. Because some secrets, once unmasked, refused to stay hidden. Claire Harper lay awake for hours, the ceiling fan's thrum echoing in her mind as she wrestled with every choice that led to this moment. By midnight, she felt no remorse, only a fierce resolve to protect her marriage, her children, and her dignity. When Jackson and Sophie stirred in their sleep, she gently tucked the blankets and kissed their foreheads. Then, slipping in her robe, she descended the stairs to the kitchen. David's car was gone from the driveway. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Claire moved with purpose. On the counter lay the dinner menu she'd prepared: roast chicken, roasted vegetables, and Claire's homemade lemon tart. She'd set the table for three, two places and one empty, with a folded napkin bearing a single white rose. At 12:37 a.m., the front door clicked. Claire steadied herself at the kitchen island. David appeared, suit jacket slung over one arm, face pale. Behind him followed Ella Torres, 21, trembling in a lightweight dress, her hair loose, eyes wide with dread. "Claire," David began, looking between his wife and his young lover. Claire lifted a slender chef's knife from its block and placed it on the counter. "Sit," she said softly, nodding toward the chair beside David. Ella froze and glanced helplessly at David. "Ella," Claire continued, "I thought you said you never crossed that line." Her voice was even, but her hand trembled as she laid out the plates. "You lied." David stepped forward. "Claire, don't." Claire held up a gloved hand. "We finished dinner first." She dished the roast chicken, thick slices of breast meat, onto each plate. Then the vegetables. Ella sat, trembling. David hesitated, then sank into his chair. Claire poured water into their glasses. Ella's hands shook so violently the ice clinked. Claire watched her, expression blank. "What was worth risking everything?" she asked, voice low. Ella swallowed. "He promised he'd leave her for me. He said I was special." Tears welled. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper." Claire nodded and turned to David. "And you promised what?" "That would never hurt her." She set his plate down with deliberate care. "That my family could stay intact." David's lips quivered. He looked at Ella, guilt burning in his eyes. I needed something different." Claire exhaled, steeling herself. She picked up the knife. "Then let me show you what different feels like." The room's single pendant light caught its blade, silver gleaming. David lunged, but Claire's reflexes were sharp. She twisted, slashing his right hand across the palm. He cried out, dropping to his knees, blood seeping between his fingers on the polished tile. Ella screamed and scrambled from her chair. Claire's eyes remained fixed on David. "Don't move," she warned. David clutched his wounded hand, staring up in shock. "Claire, please." Claire's voice caught. "Lisa," she whispered, using her childhood name. "This is where it ends." She turned to Ella. "You wanted him. Now you have him." She advanced with a knife. Ella backed toward the stove, her foot catching on a stool. Ella stumbled, knocking a pan from the counter. It clattered, and in that moment of distraction, Claire's knife found its mark. The blade struck Ella's abdomen with a wet thud. Ella's scream was raw, tearing through the stillness as she crumpled to the floor, clutching the wound. David scrambled upright, pressing his hand to Ella's side. Blood spread across her dress in dark, spreading petals. Claire dropped the knife and stood motionless, chest heaving. Ella's eyes fluttered shut. I'm sorry," she whispered, voice fading. He said, a soft gurgle, then silence. Ella lay still, the rose-shaped stain on her dress stark against the tile. David looked at Claire. Horror replaced guilt. He tried to stand, but his injured hand gave out. "Claire, what have you done?" Claire's knees buckled, and she sank beside Ella's body. Tears streamed as realization crashed over her. The life she protected had been shattered by her own hand. Moments later, the wail of sirens pierced the night. Claire pressed her forehead against the cold tile floor, hands stained red. David's frantic voice ran laps around her as he dialed 911 on his uninjured hand. "Please help. My wife. She's killed her. Our delivery girl," he stammered. Claire sat back, head in hands. The knife lay abandoned, gleaming under harsh red and blue light. In the kitchen's bright glare, the perfect suburb's dark secret was finally revealed. An affair had ignited a frenzy of betrayal and revenge, leaving 2 lives irrevocably lost and 1 marriage beyond saving. The flashing lights of 3 squad cars painted the Harper kitchen in harsh red and blue as officers spilled through the front door. Detective Marcus Lee ducked under the crime scene tape, nodding to uniformed officers securing the perimeter. Paramedics hovered over Ella's lifeless form, their solemn faces confirming what Claire Harper already knew. Ella Torres was dead. David Harper sat on a chair in the dining room, his wounded hand wrapped in gauze, face ashen. He rocked gently, eyes unfocused. Claire knelt beside Ella's body, trembling. Detective Lee approached, donning latex gloves. "Mrs. Harper, I'm Detective Lee," he said quietly. "I know this is traumatic, but I need to ask you some questions." Claire looked up, tears in her eyes. "It was an accident. She attacked him." Lee held up a hand. "Let's start at the beginning. You called 911. David's voice wavered as he spoke. I tried to stop her. It happened so fast." He glanced at Claire, guilt and fear flickering across his features. Detective Lee knelt beside the body, noting the single stab wound to Ella's abdomen, the overturned stool, the smear of blood across the tile. "Ella was stabbed once, directly to the abdomen," he said into his radio. "Notify homicide, preserve the knife." Turning back to Claire and David, he continued, "I'll need your statements separately." "Mrs. Harper, can you walk me through what happened?" Claire rose unsteadily, wrapping her robe tighter. "She was leaving. I asked her to." Her voice cracked. I thought if I confronted her, I could scare her away." Detective Lee listened, eyes gentle but intent. "What did you say to her, ma'am?" Claire closed her eyes. "I told her, you wanted him, now you have him." I didn't mean," she broke into sobs. Lee stepped back, nodding to an officer. "Let's give her some space." He then sat across from David. "Mr. Harper, you told dispatch your wife attacked her. Was there any physical struggle before that?" David swallowed hard. "Claire, she lost control. I tried to pull her back, but he shuddered." The knife flashed in her hand. Across the room, uniformed officers bagged the dropped chef's knife and collected samples. Lee surveyed the scene. Children's drawings still on the fridge, a single white rose wilted on the counter, and a trail of blood droplets leading to the foyer. He rose. "We'll need your phones, your cards, anything with messages or call logs. And I'm placing you both under restricted movement until we clear this." His voice was firm. As Claire and David were guided upstairs to change into hospital gowns for their wounds and further interview, Lee returned to Ella's body. He took one last look at the pristine suburban kitchen, now turned crime scene, then exited to coordinate with a medical examiner and forensic team. Outside, the May night air was cool, but inside the Harper home, something far more chilling had settled. The realization that passion, betrayal, and a single moment of violence could transform the most idyllic of settings into ground zero for tragedy. Detective Marcus Lee returned to the Harper home before dawn, the early light creeping through drawn curtains as forensic technicians photographed every drop of blood on the kitchen tiles. He paused at the threshold of the crime scene, once a warm family space, now frozen in a tableau of violence, and gathered Claire and David in the living room under the soft glow of a single floor lamp. Claire Harper sat on the edge of the sofa, her robe wrapped tightly around her, eyes red from hours of tearful pacing. Across the room, David Harper, his hand still bandaged, leaned back in a folding chair, jaw clenched as he stared at the patterned rug. Lee placed his notebook on the coffee table and took a slow breath. Last night's chaos didn't arise from nowhere. He began quietly. This was the culmination of secrets you all harbored, and I need to understand each of your motives before we piece together what really happened. He studied Claire first. Mrs. Harper, you invited Ella here under the guise of family dinner, but you knew exactly who you were luring inside. You told Dispatch you meant to scare her off. Then you grabbed the knife. Claire's hands shook as she folded them in her lap. I betrayed my own marriage, she whispered, but I never imagined. I lost control. She closed her eyes, reliving the moment she crossed that line. Lee nodded and made a note. Jealousy, yes, but also measured planning. Next, Lee turned to David. Mr. Harper, you orchestrated those early morning orders on your corporate card. You exploited your position of privilege to pursue an affair with a young delivery driver. And when Claire confronted you, you tried to shield yourself. David's face contorted with shame. I panicked, he admitted. I thought if I could stop her from talking, I could salvage everything. Lee raised an eyebrow. Your delayed 911 call and the way you bandaged your hand. Was that during a struggle or an attempt to create an alibi? David's throat tightened. He offered no answer. Lee walked to the crime scene tape near the kitchen. Then there's the possibility of someone else, an unknown presence. He tapped the yellow ribbon. Neighbors heard footsteps upstairs at 1:15 a.m. before Ella arrived. A security camera across the street caught a silhouette on your second-floor balcony. Were you expecting someone, Mr. Harper? David flinched. I don't know. I never checked. I was focused on Claire and Ella. Lee jotted third party in his notes. Pulling together handwritten timelines and blood spatter reports, Lee explained how the single, downward stab didn't match a panic thrust, but the precision of someone who rehearsed the act in their mind. The knife wound to Ella's abdomen was aimed center mass, too deliberate for a stray swipe. This wasn't just a crime of passion, Lee said, voice low. It bears hallmarks of revenge. Claire's lips trembled. Revenge for what? For his betrayal? For the humiliation? She stared at David. I wanted him to feel the pain I did. David buried his face in his hands. And I wanted to keep the secret. My reputation, my job, our family. His voice cracked. We both played a part. Lee closed his notebook. We'll need concrete proof of any third player, he said, switching gears. But both of you had clear opportunity and motive. Claire, to punish the other woman. David, to eliminate the witness to your indiscretion. I'll request neighbor surveillance, phone tower pings, and forensics to pinpoint the angle of that blade. In the meantime, anything you've omitted could shift the entire narrative. As Lee left them to reflect, the Harper home felt even colder. The kitchen, once the heart of their family, stood silent, its knife block oddly empty. The software of the refrigerator seemed to mock the fractured household, reminding them that every lie, every hidden rendezvous, had staked its claim in blood. Outside, dawn broke in pale hues over the quiet cul-de-sac. Detective Lee watched from his car as Claire and David emerged onto the porch, faces drawn but resolute. The perfect suburb had proven vulnerable to human frailty, and Lee knew the next steps would expose even darker secrets until the full truth rose from the splattered tiles and fractured promises of Maplewood Drive. Detective Lee paced outside the evidence room at precinct headquarters, clutching a manila folder thick with CCTV stills, phone logs, and forensics reports. He'd spent the better part of the morning piecing together the technological trail that would finally lift the veil of uncertainty on Maplewood Drive. Heading into the interview room, he spotted Officer Daniels waiting with 2 hot coffees and offered a grateful nod. Let's crack this case, Lee said, setting the drinks aside. Within minutes, they compiled 3 critical revelations. 1. CCTV footage. A neighbor's doorbell camera, time-stamped 11:02 p.m. the night of the murder, caught Ella Torres approaching the Harper front door. She knocked twice, tap, tap, just as Claire had instructed. 2 minutes later, the lens recorded David Harper stepping out onto the porch, peering down the street as if checking for watchers. Then, after a shadowed interval, Claire herself appeared at the doorway. She beckoned Ella inside with a downward nod. Crucially, 5 minutes later, Ella stumbled backward out of frame with the kitchen's pendant light flickering over her, followed immediately by the sight of Claire retreating inside, knife in hand. The footage, though grainy at that distance, unmistakably showed Claire's silhouette carrying a long-bladed knife. 2. Phone records. Lee tapped a printout. David's last call before midnight was to an unregistered burner. Ella's number, logged at 11 p.m., and it lasted 6 rings, unanswered. A few moments later, a second call from David's line phoned 911, but Lee's team drilled down and discovered it was placed at 12:45 a.m., 8 minutes after Claire's call to emergency. That delay, Lee noted, matches his story of panic, but also suggests he tried to buy time before implicating his wife. 3. Forensic analysis. In the lab, analysts compared the blood spatter patterns to a computer model. The results showed a downward arc consistent with a forceful downward stab, exactly as Claire described. But the entry angle, roughly 15 degrees off vertical, indicated the assailant was standing over a lower target, consistent with Ella seated on the stool. The knife's blade bore only Ella's DNA. Claire's gloves, found in the trash, tested negative for blood. Finally, the floral scent of Claire's lemon tart glaze was detected on the knife handle, tying the weapon directly to her kitchen. Armed with these facts, Lee convened a small strategy meeting in the bullpen. He laid out the timeline on a whiteboard. 11 p.m. David calls Ella's burner number. No answer. 11:02 p.m. Ella arrives, knocks twice. 11:05 p.m. David steps on a porch. Claire watches from inside. 11:07 p.m. Claire guides Ella into the house. 11:15 p.m. Shadow on porch. Door creaks open. Ella exits wounded. 11:37 p.m. Claire calls 911. 11:45 p.m. David places his 911 call. Detective Lee turned to his team. The evidence is airtight. We can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Claire Harper orchestrated and executed the fatal stabbing, while David Harper attempted to delay the investigation and shape the narrative. He paused, scanning the faces of his officers. Time to bring her in for formal charges. Interrogation room, late afternoon. Court-appointed counsel sat between Claire and Detective Lee. Claire's robe had been replaced by a fitted blue blouse, her hair pinned back. Lee offered her a chance to see the evidence. He slid the DVD tray across the table and dropped the security camera clips into the player. Claire stared at the screen, her expression unreadable as she watched her own hands gripping the knife and guiding Ella back into the house. Lee spoke softly. "Mrs. Harper, you invited Ella under false pretenses, then stabbed her, deliberately and with full knowledge of the consequences. Your actions left your husband and family in chaos." He opened the police report. "Your confession that you intended a simple scare, then escalated to lethal force, is contradicted by the downward, forceful wound and your deliberate timing." Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. Tears welled, but she said nothing. Finally, Lee closed the folder. "We'll file charges for first-degree murder and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Given the coordinated calls and David Harper's involvement in delaying emergency response." He stood. "You have the right to remain silent." Claire nodded once, collected herself, and signed the waiver form. Briefing room, next morning. As the press gathered, Lee delivered a concise statement. "Claire Harper has been formally charged with the first-degree murder of Ella Torres. David Harper faces charges of obstructing justice and aiding in the concealment of evidence. This community deserves the truth, and tonight's breakthrough ensures justice will be served." Outside the station, cameras flashed as Claire and David were led away in separate black SUVs. Maplewood Drive's shutters closed behind them. Neighbors peered from behind curtains, and the perfect suburb began to reckon with the extraordinary darkness that nearly consumed it. With the breakthrough secured, Detective Lee prepared for the final investigative push. Witness interviews, courtroom preparation, and ensuring every piece of evidence would hold up under scrutiny. Because in truth and justice, timing is everything. Detective Lee arrived early at the county courthouse. carrying a thick file of evidence. The hush of the courtroom, paneled wood, high ceilings, and rows of empty benches, felt like the calm before a storm. Today, Claire Harper would enter her plea. At 9:30 a.m., the bailiff announced her presence. Claire walked in, flanked by her attorney, looking composed in a navy suit. David sat a row behind her, head bowed, the bandage on his hand fresh and stark against his gray slacks. Judge Reynolds called the court to order. Prosecutor Angela Kim rose to her feet. "Your Honor, the people are ready to proceed." After a brief exchange, the judge turned to Claire. "How do you plead?" Claire rose, voice steady but quiet. "Guilty to first-degree murder." A collective intake of breath echoed. The judge nodded and scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later. As Claire sat, Kim motioned to Lee. He passed across the table a single exhibit, the DVD containing the doorcam footage. Later in the judge's chambers, Lee confronted Claire one final time. Alone except for the stenographer, he laid out the sequence. "You arranged the dinner. You knew Ella would come. You bought time with that dinner plating, then you struck. You intended to send a message to David. That betrayal has consequences." Claire's gaze met his. "I wanted him to feel my pain," she said softly. "But I didn't wish to kill her. I only wanted to stop her from taking my life apart." Lee studied her. "Intent doesn't negate the act. You confessed. The law must carry through." Tears shone in her eyes. "I understand." 6 weeks later, sentencing day, the courtroom overflowed as community members gathered. Judge Reynolds delivered Claire's sentence. Life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. A hush fell, justice, though slow, had arrived. Outside, David Harper addressed reporters, voice hoarse. "Deeply regret my actions and the pain I caused. I'm cooperating fully with authorities to bring closure to Ella's family." He paused. "I will live with this guilt forever." That evening, Claire's sister arranged a small service at Ella's favorite park bench. Friends, neighbors, and Ella's fellow delivery drivers placed flowers and candles. A sign read, "In memory of Ella Torres, 21, may your light guide us." David quietly stood among them, laying a single white rose. He lingered, whispering into the dusk, "Forgive me, Ella." Months later, the Harper home stood vacant, its windows shuttered. A for sale sign leaned in the front yard. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones as new families moved in, unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded inside. Detective Lee drove by one afternoon and paused. He looked at the pristine fence and the blooming magnolia, symbols of the suburb's promise. He sighed, knowing that beneath the surface, human lives hold depths of passion, betrayal, and redemption that no white picket fence can contain. In the end, the murder born of an illicit affair left scars far beyond the courtroom. Ella's family found some solace in justice. Claire's children learned a painful lesson about the fragility of trust, and David, stripped of his family and reputation, faced a future of atonement. Detective Lee closed the case file, its pages a testament to the power of secrets and the cost of vengeance. The perfect suburb of Pleasant Grove had been forever changed, a reminder that even the quietest streets can hide the darkest stories.